Hello and welcome to We Are Sunderland. You're joined by myself, Matty Hewitt, and I'm joined by Joe Ramage. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Good to be here. You?
Yeah, good. Let's get straight into it. I know there's been a lot of sort of talk on social media about who we are, what we're going to do. So We Are Sunderland's a brand new website covering the club as part of NewsQuest. So we'll be bringing you a deep dive tactical analysis, exclusive interviews from former players, including the likes of Kieran Brady. We've also partnered with familiar faces, including the Fan Museum. They do a superb job with work in the community, and of course, they're one of the best spots pre-match for a pint. You can take the family, look at plenty of Sunderland memorabilia. Have you been, Joe?
I have actually. Yeah, it's good. Plenty of good gear in there as well.
Yeah, I popped in the other week for the first time. I think when I went to uni, it wasn't there, but I popped in for the first time and I was really impressed. It looks great. Just on the website itself, the site's now live and you could subscribe for £6 for 6 months. So a little bit about myself. I started covering Sunderland. I don't know whether you want to say back in the depths of COVID, but it wasn't great when I started covering the club. Stuart Donald was obviously looking for a way out back in 2020 around Christmas time. Since then, this was when I was at the Chronicle. Since then, obviously Sunderland's been on a massive upward trajectory. I don't want to say I'm a lucky charm, but I am slightly. Both times Sunderland's been to Wembley, they have won. But yeah, it's been an upward trajectory since I started covering the club. Kieran Louis-Dreyfus obviously took over, brought in the likes of Christian Speakman from the depths of League One, obviously now in the Championship. I worked at the Chronicle, had a bit of time away from covering the club. Left just before Christmas, and I'm thrilled to be joined with Joe, just driving this Sunderland project. Just sort of over to you, mate. I mean, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting sort of 10 days, hasn't it, since I came in. We met you down at Hull, and it's been game after game after game as the festive period throws at us. But no, it's been good. It's been nice to get my feet in, and I'm looking forward to getting started. Some people might have seen me on the Hartlepool beat over the last sort of 3 years. Been plenty of ups and downs there, certainly downs lately at the minute after their promotion. Things not looking so good, relegation last season. So that's been very good experience for me, covering a club. It's fair enough at a lower league, but when an opportunity like this came up, it was a bit of a no-brainer for me, as players would say. We'll probably no doubt hear that over the next month with the transfer window and things like that. But yeah, really looking forward to getting going. Sort of based in Sunderland myself anyway, so when I've been coming back from covering Hartlepool games, I get the flavour of what's going on a match day here on Wearside anyway. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting started with it all.
Yeah, there's probably no bigger place to start either. You weren't the only new arrival, sort of me either on Sunderland. We had Michael Beale come in. There's probably no better place to start the derby this weekend. I mean, we just heard from Beale earlier today. What have you made of his first impressions? I know you've spoken to him a couple of times. What have you made of him?
It's been interesting, wasn't it? Because I know his first game was the Coventry game just a couple of days before I came in and started. And it's fair to say that didn't go particularly well, did it? On and off the field, everything was kind of it just felt as though the world was caving in, didn't it? But since then, the sort of 3 games that we've had, there's some good results. I think there's a good return over the Christmas period, 7 points from 9. He'd taken that matches last year, and it just gives everyone a chance to have settled down a little bit and get to know what he's about a little bit. You've heard him speak. He comes across quite well, to be honest. I think he said all the right things so far. People, that's one thing about this football club. People are not going to be sort of taken for fools almost by managers trying to con them in terms of what they say and things like that. So, and he certainly hasn't done that to start. He's given a good impression to me. He addressed what is obviously a massive game this weekend quite well. I thought, obviously the emphasis is on the league for Sunderland this year, but when a derby game like this comes up in the third round of the FA Cup, I think he classed it as a final, didn't he? And it's hard to disagree. It's been a long time since the two sides have played each other. I'm sure this place is going to be absolutely buzzing at the weekend. So, yeah, I've been quite impressed with them. Obviously, the results have helped that. I know there was frustration at Rotherham, but if you flip the results round, if they're getting a point at Hull and then gone to Rotherham and won and then back it up like we saw on New Year's Day against Preston, there wouldn't have been as much sort of frustration at that Rotherham game, would there? So, but yes, 7 points from 9. It's a good start, and he knows himself that it's a results business. He's still got a long way to go, probably to convince quite a few supporters. But if he wins games, particularly this weekend, then he's on a good footing, isn't he?
Yeah, he touched on that today, didn't he? At his press conference, he said he was asked whether he'd won over fans or whether he'd changed their view. And he was right to say, look, well, I'm not going to change opinion of people straight away. The timing in which he came in, I think Sunderland fans rightly raised the point that, if it's not broke, don't necessarily fix it. I do think that the departure of Mowbray put the cat amongst the pigeons a bit, because they weren't too far off. Beale, when he's come in, he said, there's minor tweaks here and there. He said we're not far away from being a good team, and it's hard to argue, isn't it? I mean, the one issue that they've had is in front of goal, but Nazar Rusin came in and scored at the weekend. I've similarly been impressed by Beale. I know it's early days. We're not getting carried away by saying, look, that he's going to be the man to lead them to promotion. I think the club itself, when we had the first meeting with Beale and Speakman, they played down expectation. I think if you look back at last season, just how impressive it was to come up and finish in the playoffs like they did. It should be as a platform, as we know, for this season. And I've just similarly to the conversations we've had, I've been impressed, but I'm aware obviously there's a lot of football still to play. I don't think Beale's under any illusion. Obviously, being at Rangers, Celtic, he's been around derby situations before. He didn't have the best record when he was up at Ibrox, but I think he touched on that today again. That anything can happen. It's the FA Cup, isn't it? I mean, it's not like derbies of days gone by where they were sort of on a level playing field, albeit in the same division. There are sort of differences between the two squad. I think someone pointed out today again, since 2019, Newcastle have spent 500 million and Sunderland's spend is nowhere near that. But I think if Sunderland were to honestly get a win, it would go down as one of the great derby wins of at least recent history.
Yeah, I agree. But I think just going back to how you started that in terms of the transition from Tony Mowbray into Michael Beale, you have to sort of look at the context of since the owners came in almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
the club's gone and got promoted out of League One and then overachieved and got into the playoffs last year. So as much as there might have been a little bit of, well, it certainly wasn't unanimous, was it, that people wanted Tony Mowbray to leave? It split quite a few, and some people weren't happy with it. Some people thought that maybe just needed a bit of freshening up. Yes, Michael Beale's appointment didn't necessarily go down as well as the ownership might have hoped that it would have done, but they have kind of got things right if you look at the trajectory of the club over these 2 years. So they probably deserve that little bit of leeway. I know that the model, that's probably a word that we will use time and time again, that We Are Sunderland, but the trajectory has been positive. It is going in the right direction. So you have to kind of give them a little bit of leeway and you have to give them a backing with that. As for the derby, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the disparity between the two clubs in terms of the ability on the field probably hasn't been as wide as what it is heading into Saturday. They are a club that have been so heavily invested in over the last 2 years since their takeover, and they're going to different heights in terms of the Champions League and things like that, where they'll eventually want to try and be winning league titles and things like that. Sunderland are so far away from that. You have to remember that, they were a League One club just last year, the year before, sorry, because we're into the new year now. But again, the trajectories, they're both going up, but they're at different scales. So it's hard to try and say that it's a level playing field, because it isn't. It just absolutely isn't. There was a lot of talk about in the press conference today, are Sunderland an underdog going into this? And Beale was keen to try and play that down, wasn't he? Saying, I don't want to let my players know that we are, but there was an acceptance that they are. And it's going to be interesting how they deal with that, because it's a derby. So while they are underdogs, there's still an expectancy for a performance. The supporters it's going to be sold out in there. It's going to be hostile. There's 6,000 Newcastle fans coming through as well, which brought its own debate as well, didn't it, last month? Yeah. There's not going to be that sort of leeway that they'll get if it had been any other team in the Premier League, where there still would have been a bit of a disparity. Certainly one of the top 6 teams in the Premier League. So it is going to be fascinating to see how that unfolds. And it's a great game for us to start, isn't it? For this launching the site, it's a great game for us to get our teeth stuck into, and one for the club as well. I think Michael Beale said that as well. He was keen to say that it's a really good opportunity for Sunderland, and it is. There's a lot of players in that squad who there's a lot of eyes on them, and a lot of players who are going to see themselves playing in the Premier League. You think of Jack Clark. Yeah. Next season, he is going to be playing in the Premier League one way or the other. You find that it would be hard to disagree with that. So it's a real good chance for him and players like him, Dan Neil, another one, to test themselves against a side who are in that sort of top 6 bracket in the Premier League.
Yeah, we saw last year, didn't they, against Fulham? Sunderland can raise the game. They're more than a match on their day. The problem being is that they've been too inconsistent at times. And Beale said that himself. At one point it was 10 wins, 10 defeats, 3 draws or something like that. That's the one issue that he probably has to iron out, and he's addressed that himself. That's another thing that impressed me, certainly from him, stating that from the outset. Look, we need to decide what team we're going to be. At the same time, he's alleviated the pressure on his players heading into this weekend. But I've found that Sunderland have actually played the better football coming up against the likes of Leeds United, West Brom in particular, teams that come out and want to play. Newcastle will come to the Stadium of Light. They'll be high pressing. Yep. But I think that might end up playing into Sunderland's hands to a degree, because they've tended to struggle, Sunderland, when there's a low block. We saw at Rotherham. I mean, at times in that first half, yes, Michael Beale was unhappy with the way that his players were playing. He wanted them to move it quicker, but there was 10 men behind the ball set, and he wanted to encourage wing play, but it was just one of those games, I think, where, especially when Sam Click scored that worldie of a strike, you just thought it's going to be one of those days. To give them credit where credit's due, they came back. This game is not going to be Rotherham United at home. That's stating the obvious. But that's what I asked him about today. It was interesting to see how he's looking forward to it on a personal level. He's such a highly regarded coach. This is, without a doubt, his toughest test to date at Sunderland in particular. It could be the biggest game all season if they don't end up getting in the playoffs. Obviously, there's still hope, and that they're there or thereabouts. But I've just been impressed by what he said and how he's handled himself in the media. The derby itself, we spoke to Dan Neil as well after the game against Preston. You can write your name in the history books, and that would certainly change the tide of how at least Michael Beale is viewed by Sunderland supporters. Newcastle as well. I don't think that there's a better time, to be honest, to play them. I think the stat was something like they've lost 3 on the bounce, was it 8 of the last 9, something like that anyway. And I just think, you know what, it's an FA Cup game. It's at the Stadium of Light. Anything can happen. You can say that. You can say that. It's cliche. You can say it about any game, but there's a bit of excitement, I think, going into this one. There hasn't been a buzz around the place, I've noticed, talking about the derby. I think the likes of Mowbray going, the defeat to Coventry, they have pushed that down the line. They've pushed it on the back burner. There hasn't been, like you said, 7 points from 9. There hasn't been like a distraction away from it. If anything, it's sort of narrowed their focus. And I feel that they've, at least over the course of the festive period, they've sort of bucked up, got their act together. I don't know about yourself.
No, I agree. I think, and he praised the mentality after the Coventry game down at Hull, didn't he? Because you go into that game, and that was a very tricky game after the battle, what happened here against Coventry. So go down there and get the clean sheet and the win was really good. And then they've like we've said, they've followed it up. I think the derby, though, you're right in what you're saying. I mean, it's not just the toughest game for Beale coming in. It's the toughest game Sunderland have had for years.
Yeah,
it's the toughest fixture that Sunderland have had since they were last in the Premier League, really, in terms of the quality of the opposition. You just look at within their ranks, like the physicality and the pace. That is something that you would be worried about as a Sunderland fan. You've looked at some of the defeats over the last year. I think if you think back to the likes of Stoke City when they came up here, heavy score lines. It's the kind of setup that they have struggled against since they've been promoted back to the division. So it's difficult because how do you combat that? Because I totally agree with what you say. Newcastle won't come and sit back. They're gonna come up here and really try and put the foot down and assert themselves in the game. Can Sunderland then do what they did against Leeds, for example, where they themselves sort of almost did a bit of a Rotherham, didn't they? They sort of sat back in the low block. They changed the system. Mike Dodds back then changed the system, and it worked really, really well. And it ended up being one of them where you come out with thinking, it was a tactical masterclass, wasn't it? At the end, because it worked. That you could play that game another 9 times and it might not work out like that. Can Sunderland set up like that against a Newcastle side like this, with the threats that they pose? It's difficult, and this is all the things that Michael Beale's got to have playing around in his head this week. Because do you go like that? Do you try and go punch for punch? Do you try and get at them and you keep the crowd on side? I mean, that's going to be vital anyway, but there are going to be periods in this game that Newcastle are going to be on top, and it's going to be worrying from a player's aspect, the inexperience of them. None of them have played in a game sort of like this. Yes, they've played in playoff semi-finals and the playoff final in League One, but this is a different kind of atmosphere, and it's been so long since the game. Both sets of fans, they're going to be kind of up for it that much more because it's been that long. So it's a really difficult one to balance everything out. And like Michael Beale was saying in the press conference as well, that inexperience is something that you wonder whether it can work one of both ways. Will they come out and be almost rabbits in the headlights, or can they sort of just put it all in the back of their minds and just go with no fear against a side like that?
Yeah, there's plenty of unanswered questions. I think not just from an outsider looking in. Beale said that himself. He hasn't had a lot of time with the squad now. Sometimes I think that can be lost. Certainly not from his point of view. He's had today. He said he'd had more games than training session, and that is difficult to get your opinion across tactically how you want them to play. It will be interesting looking beyond the derby, just seeing how he implements his own style, what he wants. The January window itself, there's so many sort of aspects, and he said he's given his opinion. I just think the next couple of months are going to be extremely, extremely interesting, particularly starting this weekend. And I know that myself and Joe will obviously be bringing you more videos sort of like this. We'll be doing live streams on Facebook. So yeah, like I said earlier, place to be for everything red and white. We'll endeavour to cover sort of the topics close to the supporters' heart. You can subscribe for £6 for 6 months, and we'll hope to see you there.